Welcome back to the Black Star universe. Today I have a full introduction of my newest character, Marcellus Rivers. It took a little time to make this, so I hope you guys like it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into it.
Marcellus Rivers was born in 1997 in a small, unremarkable town. His early childhood was one of hardship, loss, and emotional neglect. Marcellus' mother, a kind-hearted woman, disappeared when he was just 3 years old. It was never fully understood what happened to her, but her absence marked the beginning of Marcellus' emotional isolation. His grandmother, a figure of quiet strength, became his guardian and primary caregiver. Despite her best efforts to provide a loving environment, Marcellus' life was fractured by the absence of his mother and the confusion surrounding her disappearance. At the age of 5, Marcellus' world crumbled further when his grandmother passed away in her sleep. The trauma of losing the one stable figure in his life left him emotionally adrift. Marcellus spent an entire day believing she was just resting, unaware that she had passed until his uncle, Bruce, arrived to claim him. Bruce, a stern and imposing figure, was Marcellus' only surviving relative. Bruce Rivers was a man shaped by his own darkness. Someone who believed that the only way to raise a child was through extreme discipline, control, and manipulation. Marcellus was taken in by Bruce, who treated him not as family but as a test subject, someone to mold, control, and experiment with. Bruce believed in the importance of absolute obedience, strength, and intelligence. There was no room for weakness or failure in Bruce's household, and Marcellus quickly learned that his survival depended on his ability to comply and excel. From the moment he entered Bruce's home, Marcellus was subjected to relentless physical and mental challenges. Every day was a series of grueling tasks, beatings, tests, and harsh lessons that measured his obedience, pain tolerance, and intellect. Bruce pushed him to the limit, testing his endurance and his ability to adapt to pain, not for any educational benefit, but as a way to break him and rebuild him into something he could control. At the age of 7, Bruce began Marcellus combat training. What began as basic martial arts evolved into something far darker and more brutal. Bruce didn't teach him to defend himself, he taught him to dominate, to crush his opponents physically and mentally. Marcellus learned that pain was a path to power, and he accepted the beating as part of the process. Under Bruce's watch, he grew stronger, faster, and more lethal, but the toll on his psyche was just as great. At the age of 16, Marcellus experienced a traumatic event that would forever alter the course of his life. While training one day, an unnatural storm struck the area. Lightning flashed violently, striking Marcellus directly. What should have been a fatal blow did not kill him. Instead, it triggered a radical change in his body. Marcellus found himself able to manipulate black smoke, something he could not explain or control. This was not just a change in his physical form, it was the beginning of a descent into madness. The first time Marcellus transformed into smoke, it was during an emotional outburst. Overcome with rage at the torment of his life and his inability to control his fate, he screamed. As the rage built up inside him, the room was filled with swirling black tendrils of smoke. Marcellus could feel the power surging within him, but he couldn't control it. For the first time, he realized that his emotions were linked to the power inside him. His anger became the key to unlocking his abilities, but it also became his greatest weakness. The more he raged, the more destructive the smoke became. During this period, Marcellus began experiencing intense hallucinations and voices. He could hear his mother's voice, soft and distant, whispering lullabies that would soon turn into anguished screams. He also began to see her face, in the smoke, twisted, fading, and sometimes smiling, sometimes crying. The voice of Bruce echoed in his mind, laughing at his weakness and his failure to escape. A deep, unfamiliar voice also began speaking to him, merging him to surrender to the rage and to accept the power that came with it. His mental state began to deteriorate rapidly, and the hallucinations became more frequent, often pushing him to the brink of insanity. Bruce, recognizing the change in Marcellus, took immediate action. Seeing the potential for even greater control, he locked Marcellus in a room, a cold, sterile environment where he could monitor and study his newfound abilities. Bruce believed that Marcellus's powers could be harnessed, but he also saw the danger they posed. He locked Marcellus away, forcing him to confront the madness within and to test the limits of his abilities. Inside the room, Marcellus was left alone to battle the darkness. His powers continued to grow, but so did his emotional instability. The smoke would often overwhelm him, filling the room and making it nearly impossible for him to breathe. At times, the smoke would shift into solid construct tendrils that lashed out at the walls or shields that defended him from unseen attackers. He was both terrified and fascinated by his new form, but the fear of losing control kept him from fully embracing his abilities. Marcellus' mental state continued to spiral as his powers intensified. The hallucinations grew more vivid, and the voices became harder to distinguish from reality. He could no longer tell if the things he saw were real or just figments of his fractured mind. His mother's face, always distorted and melting away, haunted him day and night. The voice that had first urged him to embrace the rage became louder, promising him freedom and power if he gave in completely. But Marcellus fought against it. He feared what he might become if he lost himself entirely to the smoke. In a moment of sheer desperation, Marcellus learned to phase through the locked door of his room. His powers of intangibility had manifested fully. He could become smoke and pass through solid objects. This discovery was a turning point. For the first time, he realized he could escape, not just from the physical confines of his prison, but from Bruce's influence as well. But instead of leaving, Marcellus chose to destroy the entire room in a fit of uncontrollable rage, forcing Bruce to realize just how dangerous his creation had become. At 18, Marcellus escaped Bruce's control, but he was far from free. His powers were growing stronger, but they were also a source of constant turmoil. He spent years in isolation, hiding from the world and trying to come to terms with what he had become. He honed his skills in secrecy, practicing control over his smoke abilities while avoiding emotional outbursts. Despite his efforts to keep a low profile, the voices in his head grew louder, the hallucinations more real, and his rage more difficult to contain. As Marcellus grew older, he entered the underworld, using his abilities as an assassin. His power made him a fearsome figure, able to slip in and out of places undetected, vanishing into smoke and reappearing where his enemies least expected. His combat skills, honed over years of brutal training under Bruce, made him a lethal opponent. He became known for his cold, calculated approach to killing, though the violence continued to weigh on him. In his time as an assassin, Marcellus became more disconnected from his humanity. He used his abilities to manipulate and control his surroundings, leaving no trace of his presence. However, the deeper he delved into this dark world, the more the voices and hallucinations tormented him. They called him a monster, a killer, a broken soul beyond redemption. The rage he once struggled to control now consumed him fully, pushing him further into the darkness. At 28, Marcellus stands at a crossroads. His powers are under his control, but the emotional scars of his past continue to torment him. The hallucinations have intensified, with visions of his mother, Bruce, and shadowy figures from his past constantly invading his thoughts. He is a villain by all definitions, an assassin, a manipulator, a man consumed by rage and guilt. Yet, beneath the layers of violence and coldness, a part of him still longs for redemption, for a chance to escape the dark legacy he has built.
Every morning when you wake up and stare into that mirror, understand this: the one staring back is your savior, your soldier, your comeback story. That reflection, that's the one who's gonna drag you out the dirt, wipe the blood off your face, and tell you, stand up, we ain't done yet. Keep pushing, keep rising, you got this.